Indigenous peoples are living examples of the ways that have allowed people to live on this planet for so many thousands of years without destroying it.
Their ways of life have contributed to and have required the protection of the natural environment on which they depend. Indigenous women play a vital role in sustainable resource management as well as the enhancement and transfer of traditional knowledge.
They have their own customary laws and systems of governance supporting the sustainable coexistence of indigenous peoples and nature.
Much later came the dominating states, absorbing their lands and resources with their economic and political systems.
That is why indigenous peoples resist the impositions of these dominant states and wish to continue their distinct lifestyle, cultures, and sustainable livelihoods on the territories connected to them.
The world is becoming crowded, demand for space and resources is growing, particularly in areas occupied by indigenous peoples. Governments and corporations divvy up whatever resources they believe are theirs and take what they want. Scant regard is given to how their actions affect indigenous peoples.
Cultures are being destroyed in the name of development without consultation, representation, or fair compensation.
Indigenous peoples make up 5% of the world's population, but 15% of the poorest of the poor.
Indigenous communities have high illiteracy rates, especially among indigenous women. They have poor access to health, poor social services, poor access to basic utilities. Needs the knowledge, presence, and cultural diversity of indigenous peoples. There is so much insight to nature that will be lost without them.
For example, there are currently over 100 projects funded by industrialized countries studying indigenous medicines.
If indigenous peoples are to survive, grow, reach out, and relate to the dominant states that now envelop them, it has to be on their own terms, in their own way, in their own time. Anything less will compromise the integrity of who they are and what they have to offer.
Indigenous peoples do not want to ignore or fight the changing world. They simply want the right to remain true to themselves within the changing world in their own way and be respected for who they are.
Of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, also known as the Declaration.
It has been adopted by states to address historical and potential future injustices and discrimination against indigenous peoples.
It took over 25 years of lobbying by indigenous peoples to have this declaration adopted.
It provides a framework which, if implemented, enables indigenous peoples to determine their future in equal partnership with third parties while protecting their culture.
To be able to continue their sustainable way of living on land they have occupied for generations.
To run their communities, to make decisions and have the final say on projects that affect them.
To continue the use and development of their own laws linked to the economic, political, spiritual, and cultural circumstances of their communities.
An integral part of the Declaration is the right to making free, prior, and informed consent, often referred to as FPIC.
This outlines how indigenous peoples must be empowered to make informed decisions about any project that may affect them. Information about a project must be given to indigenous peoples free of coercion. prior to any project happening in a way that is understandable to the community. Final consent on whether the project happens is the decision of the indigenous peoples.
But why